Colors of Destiny. In the heart of a bustling city, nestled among the towering skyscrapers and the cobblestone streets, there lay a prestigious art school, Aurora Arts Conservatory, a sanctuary for those who breathe life into their imaginations through paintbrushes, chisels, and the limitless canvases of their minds. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced to the ground like fleeting dreams, Margaret, the elegant and sophisticated daughter of a wealthy family, stood on the threshold of this illustrious institution. Her heart swelled with pride and unbridled joy. Margaret had earned her place here, not through the wealth and influence of her family, but through raw talent and an unwavering passion for the arts. Her acceptance was a testament to her dedication, making her celebration all the more exuberant. The grand foyer of the art school was adorned with portraits of renowned alumni, whose works adorned the walls of the world's most esteemed galleries. The school's legacy was palpable, and Margaret, with her radiant smile, embodied a new chapter in that storied history. Her mother, in a designer dress, clutched her husband's arm, tears of pride glistening in her eyes. The grand entrance was framed by a colossal bronze sculpture that seemed to embrace the heavens, a symbol of aspiration, creativity, and the limitless possibilities that lay within those hallowed halls. But just beyond the embrace of the art school's marble-clad walls, in a less glamorous corner of the city, life was a stark contrast. In a gritty neighborhood marked by peeling graffiti and forgotten dreams, a rebellious boy named Michael had just turned 18. Abandoned as a baby, he'd grown up on the streets, finding refuge in the world of urban art. He'd honed his craft not in the opulence of studios but amidst the chaos of life's harsh realities. For Michael, the city was his canvas, and his art was a defiant outcry, a colorful rebellion against a world that had cast him aside. As Margaret reveled in the embrace of her family's love and support, Michael navigated the harsh streets with the calloused hands of experience. Their lives were worlds apart, seemingly destined never to intersect. But fate, as it often does, had other plans for these two souls on opposite ends of the spectrum: Margaret, the privileged heiress of artistic tradition, and Michael, the tenacious street artist with nothing to lose and everything to gain. In the chapters that would unfold, their worlds would collide, and the alchemy of art and circumstance would unveil a story as beautiful as it was unexpected. In the hallowed halls of the Aurelian Academy of Fine Arts, Margaret's initial euphoria had begun to ebb away. The demands of her classes were unforgiving, and the weight of expectation from her famous, eccentric, and perpetually dissatisfied art teacher, Professor Lucius van der Alt, loomed over her like an ominous storm cloud. As Margaret nervously approached the studio where Professor van der Alt held court, she couldn't help but notice the whispers and hushed tones of her fellow students. The man was a legend, but not for his warmth or encouragement. His reputation was built on his exacting standards and the unrelenting pursuit of artistic perfection. The studio was a cavernous space filled with canvases, sculptures, and easels, each piece bearing the weight of countless hours of effort and sacrifice. Professor van der Alt, a tall figure with piercing eyes and a shock of unruly white hair, stood at the front, scrutinizing a massive canvas that bore the marks of innumerable revisions. He turned, his eyes locking onto Margaret's with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Professor van der Alt, ah, Margaret, isn't it? Join us, won't you? Your family's wealth and connections may have opened this door for you, but remember, it's your artistry that will determine whether you stay. Margaret's confidence wavered, and she nodded, taking a seat at an empty easel. She felt like a minnow swimming among sharks, her canvas a vast expanse of uncertainty. Professor van der Aalt, look around, my dear students. Here, your pedigree counts for nothing. Your family's wealth and your last name won't save you from mediocrity. What matters is what you bring to this space. What you dare to express. As the professor began his critique of a student's work, his words were a merciless examination of technique and intent. Margaret, who had always received praise and admiration in her sheltered life, felt a mounting sense of dread. Her palms grew sweaty, and she clutched her paintbrush with trembling fingers. Professor van der Aalt, this composition lacks depth, emotion, soul. It's as though you're afraid to bare your true self on the canvas. Art is not about hiding, my dear. It's about tearing down the walls, exposing your rawest vulnerabilities, and letting the world see your truth. Margaret bit her lip, her heart pounding. She knew she had the talent, but here, talent alone was not enough. She had to find the courage to break free from the constraints of her privileged upbringing and embrace the rawness of her own experiences. Margaret, Professor, I'll strive to do better. I want to learn, to grow as an artist. Professor van der Aalt's stern expression softened for a moment, and he regarded her with a hint of approval. Professor van der Aalt, good. Remember, it's not about your past, it's about your potential. Now, paint. Paint like your soul depends on it. As the hour unfolded, Margaret felt the pressure and stress intensify, but she also sensed a spark of determination igniting within her. Her journey at the academy was proving to be more challenging and transformative than she could have ever imagined, and she was determined to rise to the occasion, to discover the artist she could become. As the intense art class came to a close, Professor Lucius van der Aalt, known for his stern and exacting demeanor, approached Margaret. His eyes, which had previously held a hint of approval, now bore a resolute determination. Professor van der Aalt, Miss Margaret, I want you to understand something very clearly. Today, I was gentle with you, more forgiving than I should have been. Tomorrow, that changes. Margaret nodded, her determination strengthening. She knew she had to prove herself in this challenging environment. Margaret, I'll rise to the challenge, Professor. I want to improve, to express myself authentically through my art. The professor's expression softened slightly, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. Professor van der Aalt, that's the spirit, Miss Margaret. Now, let me offer you a piece of advice. Art is not confined to these walls or the confines of our studio. It's everywhere, in the world around us. The air we breathe, the streets we walk, the people we meet, everything is art. Margaret listened intently, absorbing his words. Professor van der Aalt, I suggest you step out of this school and explore the surroundings. Find inspiration in the most unexpected places. Let life itself become your canvas, and every moment an opportunity to paint. Margaret's eyes sparkled with newfound enthusiasm. She had been sheltered for too long, and now she was ready to embrace the world as her muse. Margaret, thank you, Professor. I'll take your advice to heart. I'll immerse myself in the world, find beauty in the everyday, and let it flow into my art. Professor van der Alt gave her a nod of approval before turning to leave. Professor van der Alt, remember, Miss Margaret, art is not just about technique, it's about capturing the essence of life itself. Go, explore, and let the world infuse your art with its vitality. With those parting words, Professor van der Alt left Margaret standing in the studio, her determination burning brighter than ever. She was ready to venture beyond the art school's walls, to breathe in the world and let it shape her art in ways she had never imagined. Margaret shared her conversation with the teacher and extended an invitation to Eloise and Mark, urging them to join her in exploring the city. Margaret, Eloise, and Mark, 3 art students determined to discover new sources of inspiration, embarked on a journey beyond the familiar confines of their art school. They strolled through the bustling streets of the city, their footsteps echoing with youthful enthusiasm and curiosity. But as they ventured further from the school, they couldn't help but notice a gradual transformation in the urban landscape. Margaret, have you guys noticed how the streets are changing? It's like we're entering a different world. Eloise, yeah, it's almost as if the city's makeup artist called in sick today. These buildings look tired, dirty, and a tad outdated. Mark, well, you know what they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe this is the avant-garde district, and we're witnessing the birth of a new, gritty movement in urban aesthetics. Margaret, a gritty movement, huh? Well, I suppose we can find beauty in unexpected places, right? Let's embrace the challenge. As they continued their exploration, their discussion veered into the realm of artistic interpretation. Eloise, look at that one. It's practically begging for a makeover. Mark, and this graffiti-covered wall? It's a canvas just waiting for some street art magic. Margaret, you know, sometimes it's the imperfections and scars of a place that tell the most compelling stories. The wear and tear, the layers of history, they all have their own beauty. As they roamed through the streets, their banter shifted from humorous to philosophical. They found themselves discussing the contrast between the polished world of their art school and the raw, unfiltered reality of the city's forgotten corners. Eloise, I guess this is where art truly comes alive. It's not always about pristine studios and ideal conditions. It's about capturing the essence of life in all its messy, imperfect glory. Mark, absolutely. Art isn't just about creating pretty pictures, it's about reflecting the world as it is, in all its complexity. Margaret, maybe this is exactly what we needed, a dose of reality to shake up our art, to inspire us to break free from tradition and find beauty in unexpected places. As Margaret, Eloise, and Mark continued their exploration of the changing streets, Mark's keen eye caught sight of an almost dilapidated building adorned with a vibrant graffiti mural. The mural depicted a majestic tree teeming with life, its branches stretching across the entire facade, seemingly breathing new life into the aged structure. What caught their attention were the remarkably perfect forms and the signature M in the bottom corner. "Mark, hey, you too, you've got to see this. It's like nature is reclaiming the city." Margaret and Eloise hurried over to where Mark was standing, their eyes widening as they took in the captivating sight. "Margaret, wow, this is incredible. The precision and detail are astonishing. Who could have done this?" "Eloise, and look at that signature M. This artist must have a knack for anonymity." "Mark, well, they certainly know how to make an entrance. What do you think, Margaret? Could this be the work of our mysterious street artist, Max?" "Margaret, it's entirely possible. The style and precision do remind me of Max's work." As they continued their artistic expedition through the city, their conversation naturally led to speculations about Max, the elusive street artist whose work had captured their attention. "Mark, you know, I've been thinking. Max must be at least 40 years old by now. I mean, to become that famous, to have your art known and recognized, it takes time." "Eloise, that does make sense. Legends don't just spring up overnight. But you know what's amusing? There are so many rumors circulating about Max within our school." "Margaret, oh, do share. What have you heard?" "Mark, well, some claim that Max was actually a student right here at our art school but was expelled because he was too rebellious for the professors to handle." "Eloise, really? That would explain his familiarity with the area and his audacity in painting our school's walls." "Margaret, I've also come across other tales. There's one that suggests Max's face was badly damaged in a fire, which is why he never reveals it." "Mark, a mysterious artist with a concealed face. Quite the enigmatic figure, isn't he?" "Eloise, and then there are those who argue that we pay Max too much attention, especially considering the school's walls were adorned with graffiti 3 years ago in the shape of a war tank. The mural was astonishingly detailed and impeccably executed." "Mark, even Professor Vanderalt was astonished and impressed by the graffiti mural." This shared moment of awe deepened their connection and further fueled their curiosity about Max's identity and the art that had forever left a mark on their school's history. Their fascination with the enigmatic legend of Max deepened, leaving them eager to uncover more of his secrets and the art that had made him a living legend. As the group stood before the astonishing graffiti mural, their discussions about Max's identity and the impressive graffiti that had adorned the school's walls 3 years ago continued. Suddenly, a new figure entered the scene, catching their attention. Michael, no older than 18, had an air of youthful rebellion about him. He bore the unmistakable aura of someone who had taught himself graffiti art from a young age. With a nonchalant swagger, Michael approached the group, his paint-splattered hands and colorful attire giving away his identity as a street artist. "Michael, what's all the fuss about, huh?" "I'm Michael." "Margaret, oh, we were just admiring the graffiti mural. It's quite extraordinary." Eloise and Mark exchanged curious glances, sensing that Michael's arrival might bring a touch of rebellion and unpredictability to the situation. Michael, extraordinary, you say? Well, you ain't seen nothin' yet. With that, Michael reached into his bag and pulled out a can of spray paint. Without hesitation, he began adding his own touches to the mural, aiming to enhance and improve it. Eloise, is he altering it? Margaret watched in shock as Michael continued his audacious act, seemingly unbothered by their presence. She felt a mixture of fascination and concern, torn between admiration for his artistic skills and anxiety about the mural they had all been admiring. Margaret, hey, what are you doing to that mural? It was already a masterpiece. Eloise, Mark, and Margaret exchanged worried glances, fearing that Michael's intervention might ruin the work they had come to appreciate. Michael, are you sure about this? You might inadvertently damage the artwork. But Michael remained undeterred, believing that he could enhance the mural even further. He continued to spray, adding his own colorful flourishes to the existing masterpiece. In a moment of desperation and concern for the artwork, Margaret took action. With determination, she snatched the spray can from Michael's hand and pressed it firmly against his own chest, accidentally releasing a burst of paint that splattered onto his favorite t-shirt, leaving an irremovable mark. Michael, what the? You ruined my shirt. Margaret's bold move had disrupted Michael's artistic process and left him feeling not only frustrated but also deeply offended. He wiped the paint from his t-shirt, glaring at the trio. Margaret, I'm sorry, but we were worried you might ruin the mural. It's a work of art that we all admired. Michael, ignorant art school kids. You don't get it, do you? I was trying to make it better. Now, thanks to you, it's all messed up. With a resentful glance, Michael turned and walked away, leaving the trio feeling conflicted and remorseful for their role in the unexpected clash. As Michael stormed away, the group was left in a state of unease. Eloise, surprisingly fascinated by Michael's intervention, turned to Margaret with an impassioned expression. Eloise, Margaret, why did you have to make him leave? He was improving the mural, adding a fresh perspective to it. We could have witnessed something extraordinary. Margaret, still feeling a mix of regret and determination, defended her actions. Margaret, I know, Eloise, but I was afraid he might ruin the work we all admired so much. It was a tough call to make. Mark, on the other hand, supported Margaret's decision, his admiration for her intervention clear. Margaret did the right thing. She saved the work from potential damage. That guy seemed like he was about to do more harm than good, coming in empty-handed and all. Eloise, her fascination with Michael's rebellious approach clashing with Margaret and Mark's concerns, couldn't help but express her disappointment. Eloise, I just thought we could have witnessed a unique artistic collaboration, a fusion of different styles. But I understand your concerns, Margaret. Tensions lingered in the air as the trio contemplated the missed opportunity and the unexpected clash of perspectives on how to appreciate and protect art. Michael's brief presence had left a lasting impact, not only on the mural but also on the dynamics of their group, prompting them to question the boundaries and complexities of the art world they were navigating. As they returned to the familiar surroundings of their art school, Margaret couldn't shake the lingering thoughts about Michael and her own actions. She found herself wrestling with a sense of guilt, wondering if her judgment of Michael's artistic intervention had been out of place. Who was she to decide the quality of an artistic act? Margaret's encounter with Professor van der Aalt and his challenging feedback had certainly left an impact on her. It had made her more critical, more demanding of herself and others, and perhaps less open to different artistic perspectives. She questioned whether her newfound rigor had overshadowed her ability to appreciate the spontaneous and unconventional. Walking through the corridors of the school, Margaret couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. She had acted on impulse, driven by a desire to protect the mural she had admired so much. But in doing so, she had inadvertently stifled a creative spirit, a fellow artist's unique expression. As she entered her studio, Margaret set her art supplies on the table, her thoughts still lingering on the events of the day. She felt a growing sense of unease and introspection, realizing that perhaps she had been too hasty in her judgment of Michael. In the end, she couldn't help but feel somewhat sorry for the turn of events. Michael's audacity had been a stark reminder of the diverse and sometimes conflicting perspectives that existed within the world of art. Margaret knew that she needed to find a balance between her own artistic standards and an appreciation for the unexpected and unconventional. With the weight of her earlier encounter with Michael heavy on her mind, Margaret decided to venture out alone to those intriguing yet barely lit streets. She held on to the hope of encountering him again, yearning to understand his perspective and perhaps make amends for her earlier actions. The night was a shroud of mystery, each step filled with trepidation as she navigated through the unfamiliar territory, startled by every sound and shadow. Soon, her footsteps led her to a bridge that appeared somewhat dysfunctional, its structure echoing the wear and tear of time. As she cautiously approached, Margaret's heart skipped a beat when she spotted Michael at work, creating a new masterpiece under the dim light. Before her eyes, Michael was fashioning a graffiti mural of a princess, her regal demeanor reminiscent of Winterhalter's 1865 portrait, Empress Elizabeth of Austria. The princess was adorned in a white satin evening dress, covered with thousands of silver foil stars that shimmered beneath a delicate layer of tulle. The dress, seemingly designed by Worth, adhered to the fashionable trends of the era, yet bore singular touches like the stars, befitting her status as empress. But as Margaret drew closer to admire the artwork, her heart leapt into her throat, and shock coursed through her. The face of the princess in Michael's mural was strikingly similar to her own. Margaret, This is incredible. The resemblance, it's uncanny. Michael, still engrossed in his work, turned to face Margaret. His expression mirrored her own shock as he realized the eerie similarity between the mural's princess and Margaret herself. Michael, you look just like her. Margaret and Michael stood there, a surreal moment of shared astonishment enveloping them. The boundaries between art and reality seemed to blur as they confronted the inexplicable resemblance, leaving them both with a profound sense of wonder and curiosity. Margaret, amazed by the graffiti mural's uncanny resemblance to her, couldn't help but tease Michael, "I don't remember granting you permission to feature my face on all the walls." Michael, somewhat embarrassed, quickly tried to downplay the situation. "Oh, no, it's not you. She doesn't look like you at all. She's the girl from my dreams, the one who inspires my work." Margaret, her playful spirit undeterred, continued to jest. "An interesting dream girl, huh? Is that how they talk in the world of graffiti?" Michael, initially hesitant to reveal his thoughts, found himself drawn into the flirtatious banter. "Well, I suppose she's not the only one who's fascinating." Margaret, sensing a hint of attraction in Michael's response, pressed on. "So, you only realized that today, after our little encounter at school?" Michael, with a playful glint in his eye, finally admitted with a grin, "All right, society artiste, maybe you did leave quite an impression. You were the girl with the fire from the art school." Their exchange took on a flirtatious undertone, and Michael's admission of his fascination with Margaret added a layer of intrigue to their burgeoning connection. The spark of attraction between them continued to grow, leaving both Margaret and Michael eager to explore the intriguing possibilities that lay ahead. Margaret, recognizing the flirtatious tone of their conversation, offered a sincere apology, saying, "I'm sorry for my earlier actions. That fire in me can sometimes make me impulsive. I probably misinterpreted the situation." Michael, appreciating Margaret's honesty and willingness to clear the air, decided to continue their playful exchange. He responded with a twinkle in his eye, "Ah, the fire in you. I have to say, I'm quite intrigued by it. So, how do you plan to interpret this opera we've started?" Margaret, now fully engaged in the flirtatious banter, smiled and replied, "Well, perhaps we should let the opera unfold naturally, scene by scene, without rushing to the final act. Who knows what artistic wonders we might discover along the way." Michael, his eyes locked onto Margaret's with a mix of anticipation and attraction, took a step closer to her beneath the dimly lit bridge. He leaned in slightly, his voice filled with a sense of intimacy as he said, "The final act is here, right in front of us. How would you like to proceed, Margaret?" Margaret, drawn into the moment and the undeniable chemistry between them, met Michael's gaze with a soft smile. Her voice, filled with a hint of playfulness and genuine interest, responded, "Let's proceed with an open heart and an open canvas, Michael. After all, art and love are meant to be explored and celebrated, scene by scene." Feeling a sudden rush of shyness and a desire to collect her thoughts, Margaret took a step back from Michael, her cheeks tinted with a faint blush. She managed a slightly nervous smile and said, "I should probably head back to school now. It's getting late." Michael, respectful of Margaret's decision, nodded and replied, "Of course, Margaret. Don't let me keep you. Until next time, perhaps?" Margaret nodded in agreement, her heart still racing from their encounter. "Yes, until next time," she said softly. With that, Margaret turned and hurried back towards the familiar surroundings of their art school, leaving behind the intriguing and flirtatious encounter with Michael. As she walked away, her mind buzzed with thoughts of the connection they had shared, and the promise of what the future might hold. Margaret returned to her dorm room, her mind still filled with the events of the day. She had experienced a whirlwind of emotions, from the clash with the graffiti artist to the flirtatious encounter under the bridge. Despite the excitement and uncertainty, she felt more alive than she had been in months. As she lay in her bed, the exhaustion from the day's events quickly caught up with her. The weight of her eyelids became irresistible, and Margaret drifted into a deep and restful sleep. In her dreams, she saw a canvas unfurling before her, filled with vibrant colors and the promise of new artistic and personal horizons. It was a night of peaceful slumber, with the anticipation of future adventures and the memory of Michael's presence still lingering in her heart. The next morning, Margaret was in the midst of a dream so peaceful that even the birds outside seemed to be singing in harmony with her slumber. However, her serene rest was abruptly shattered by the raucous voice of Eloise. "Eloise, Margaret, rise and shine. We're in danger of invoking the wrath of Professor Vanderalt, aka Eyeglass. We're already late for his class." Margaret, jolted awake by Eloise's alarming wake-up call, groaned and mumbled, "Eyeglass? Seriously?" Eloise, who was already in a frantic rush to get ready, chuckled, "Yep, Eyeglass. You know, the professor who can spot a misplaced brushstroke from a mile away." Margaret, now fully aware of the dire situation, threw on her clothes and scrambled to gather her art supplies. She couldn't help but roll her eyes at the thought of the notorious Professor Vanderalt and his obsession with precision. As they hurried out the door, Margaret and Eloise exchanged knowing glances. Oversleeping on a day like this was almost comical, and they couldn't afford to let Eyeglass catch them tardy for his class, especially when he had a reputation for having eyesight sharper than the sharpest eyeglass. Margaret and Eloise arrived at the classroom, breathless and disheveled, just as Professor Vanderalt was about to close the door. Their hearts sank as they realized they had missed the crucial moment. "Professor Vanderalt, late again, ladies? Do you have any idea what time it is?" Margaret and Eloise exchanged guilty glances and muttered apologies, knowing full well that Eyeglass wouldn't let this slide. "Professor Vanderalt, your tardiness won't go unnoticed. And not only will you have to catch up on today's lecture, but your work will also be delayed. Time waits for no one, and neither does art." Margaret and Eloise nodded in understanding, chastened by Eyeglass's scolding. They knew they would have to work extra hard to make up for their lateness and ensure that their artistic endeavors wouldn't suffer the consequences of their late arrival. As the lecture continued and Margaret and Eloise settled into their seats, there was a sudden hushed murmur of excitement that rippled through the classroom. All eyes turned toward the entrance, and to everyone's surprise, Michael made a dramatic entrance, dressed scantily as a model for a Prometheus painting. Michael's presence was captivating, and his costume was nothing short of intriguing. As the god known for stealing fire, he exuded an air of rebellion and audacity that was hard to ignore. The classroom, once filled with tension from their late arrival, was now buzzing with anticipation. "Professor Vanderalt, Mr. Michael, what's the meaning of this?" Michael, standing confidently at the front of the classroom, replied with a sly grin, "I thought we could use a little fire in our art today, Professor." The class erupted into a mixture of laughter, awe, and curiosity. Michael's unexpected appearance had injected a dose of excitement into the otherwise routine lecture. Professor van der Aalt, although initially taken aback, couldn't help but appreciate the creativity and boldness of the gesture. Professor van der Aalt, well, it seems Mr. Michael has decided to become our muse for the day. Let's make the most of it, shall we? With that, the class embarked on an art session like no other, with Michael as their unconventional model and Prometheus as their inspiration. The room was alive with creativity and energy, as the students eagerly captured the essence of fire and rebellion in their artwork, all thanks to Michael's daring entrance. As the art class continued with Michael posing as Prometheus, Eloise couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. She leaned over to Margaret and whispered, "So, Margaret, where did you disappear to last night?" Margaret, still feeling a bit shy about her late-night encounter with Michael, remained rather vague in her response. "Oh, just exploring the city a bit. Nothing too exciting." Eloise raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more to the story, but she didn't press further. Instead, she turned her attention to her own painting, where she decided to incorporate a young woman who approached Prometheus provocatively, adding a bold and unexpected twist to her artwork. As the class progressed, Professor van der Aalt, with his keen eye for detail, approached Eloise's painting and studied it closely. He then turned to Eloise and said, "Ms. Eloise, I see you've taken an imaginative approach with your portrayal. While creativity is encouraged, let's remember to maintain the integrity of the subject matter." Eloise blushed, realizing that her provocative addition had caught the professor's attention. Her classmates couldn't help but suppress laughter at the situation, finding humor in the unexpected turn of events. Margaret, with a sly grin, nodded at her fellow students, secretly reveling in the light-hearted atmosphere of the class. Professor van der Aalt's correction, while necessary, had added a touch of comedy to their artistic endeavors, making the day's lesson memorable for all the right reasons. Margaret, inspired by the presence of Michael as Prometheus, decided to take a unique approach to her painting. While all her colleagues painted Prometheus in a static position, she meticulously reproduced the moment when Prometheus victoriously stole the fire, capturing the triumph and tension of the scene with striking realism. Professor van der Aalt, who was initially engrossed in his own work, happened to glance at Margaret's painting and was pleasantly surprised. He approached her easel, nodding approvingly. "Ms. Margaret, this is quite impressive. Your attention to detail and the dynamic nature of your portrayal are commendable. Please, continue." Margaret, however, seemed more focused on admiring Michael's portrayal as Prometheus than on her own artwork. Her gaze remained fixed on him, a fond smile playing on her lips. Professor van der Aalt, noticing her distraction, cleared his throat and addressed Margaret with a wry smile. "Ms. Margaret, when I said continue, I meant it in the artistic sense, not as an invitation to remain motionless." The classroom erupted in laughter as Professor van der Aalt's unexpected quip lightened the mood. Margaret, feeling a bit embarrassed but amused, quickly refocused on her painting, ready to continue with renewed determination. It was a light-hearted moment that added an element of humor to their art class, reminding everyone that art was not just about technique but also about staying engaged and moving forward, both in their work and in their lives. During the break, Eloise wasted no time and made a beeline for Michael. She approached him with a friendly smile and struck up a conversation. "Hey, Michael! How did you manage to get into Eyeglass's class? I mean, you've known him for ages, right?" Michael, ever the modest and enigmatic figure, responded with a casual shrug. "Yeah, we go way back. It's not a big deal for me to drop in every now and then." Eloise, amazed by Michael's humility, couldn't help but gush, "Your presence here is everything, Michael. Honestly, I'd pay just to come and be inspired by you." Michael flashed Eloise a charming smile and winked discreetly as a gesture of gratitude for her kind words. Satisfied with her conversation with Michael, Eloise returned to Margaret, excitement radiating from her. She couldn't help but exaggerate the encounter as she whispered to Margaret, "Margaret, you won't believe it. I think Michael has fallen in love with me." Margaret, amused by Eloise's enthusiasm and exaggeration, chuckled and replied, "Oh, Eloise, you always know how to make things sound so dramatic. But who knows? Maybe there's a spark there." As the art class came to an end, Margaret was so deeply engrossed in her work that she hardly noticed when everyone around her started to pack up and leave. Her attention was laser-focused on her painting, and the world outside of her artwork seemed to fade away. Just as Margaret was putting the finishing touches on her piece, she suddenly felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Michael standing there, ready to bid her farewell. His expression was one of genuine surprise as he observed her painting. "Michael, I don't remember when I gave you permission to put my face on all the paintings, Society Artiste." Margaret, with a mischievous grin, replied, "Oh, but you did give permission to everyone." Michael chuckled and took a step closer. "Well, that may be true, but you don't understand, Society Artiste. I'm here for you. I'm Prometheus, and I came after fire." Margaret, intrigued by his words, glanced at the Greek torch he held in his hand. She nodded, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You have the fire, I see it right in your hand." Michael, so, Society Artiste, besides art, what other secrets do you hold? Margaret, a playful glint in her eye, teased, "Ah, that's a trade secret, Prometheus. I can't just reveal all my mysteries at once." Michael chuckled and leaned in closer, his voice a seductive whisper. "Well, I suppose I'll have to work hard to uncover those secrets, won't I?" Margaret, matching his flirtatious tone, replied, "You do seem to have a knack for uncovering things, especially with that fire-stealing reputation of yours." Their banter continued, filled with humor and innuendo, as they playfully probed each other's personalities and shared anecdotes about their lives. It was clear that their attraction went beyond the artistic realm, and they were eager to get to know each other on a deeper level. As the flirtatious banter between Michael and Margaret continued to heat up, the two found themselves irresistibly drawn to each other. Michael, his eyes locked onto Margaret's, finally leaned in for a passionate kiss. It was a moment filled with anticipation, the culmination of their growing attraction. Just as their lips were about to meet, the door to the room swung open with a loud bang, and Eloise stood there, wide-eyed and clearly flustered by the unexpected sight before her. Nerves got the best of her, and without a word, she turned on her heel and hurriedly left the room, slamming the door shut behind her. Margaret and Michael pulled away from each other, their lips almost touching but not quite, their eyes locked in a mixture of surprise and amusement. Margaret, well, that was unexpected. Michael, it seems we have an audience. Margaret hurriedly left the room to catch up with Eloise, feeling a sense of urgency to explain the situation. She found Eloise a little farther down the corridor, clearly affected by what she had witnessed. Margaret, Eloise, wait. Let me explain. Eloise turned to face Margaret, her expression a mix of frustration and disappointment. Explain what, Margaret? I saw what was happening in there. Margaret took a deep breath and tried to convey her feelings honestly. Look, Eloise, I understand you might be upset, but Michael and it's not like that. He's not in a relationship with anyone right now, and he's not a child to be forced into something. He can decide for himself what he wants. Eloise's eyes softened as she listened to Margaret's words. She sighed and spoke with a hint of vulnerability. Margaret, you know how much I care about you. I love our friendship, and I don't want a boy to come between us and ruin what we have. Margaret reached out and gently touched Eloise's arm, her voice filled with sincerity. Eloise, you mean the world to me, too. And I promise you, if there's something more between me and Michael, I will handle it with care and consideration for our friendship. But let's not jump to conclusions. Right now, we're just getting to know each other. Eloise nodded, her tension easing slightly. I hope you're right, Margaret. I care about you, and I want to protect our bond. Margaret gave Eloise a warm smile. I know you do, and I appreciate that. Let's take things one step at a time and see where this goes. Our friendship will always be a priority. As they walked back together, their friendship intact, they couldn't help but wonder how their relationships with Michael would evolve and what the future had in store for all of them. As Margaret and Eloise were getting ready for their pajama party in the evening, they were in the midst of some playful preparations. Margaret, in particular, was feeling the excitement of the upcoming gathering. In the midst of their laughter and goofy dance moves, there was a sudden, unexpected voice from the balcony. Michael, Margaret. Startled, Margaret froze mid-dance, her arms and legs sticking out at odd angles. Eloise couldn't help but burst into laughter at the comical sight before her. Eloise, well, that's one way to warm up for the party. Margaret, her face turning slightly pink with embarrassment, tried to regain her composure as she approached the balcony door. She opened it to find Michael standing there with an amused grin. Michael, I hope I'm not interrupting a secret dance rehearsal. Margaret chuckled, realizing how silly she must have looked. Not at all, just getting into the party spirit. What brings you here? Michael explained that he wanted to check in on their plans for the evening, and the three of them quickly fell into a light-hearted conversation about what snacks to prepare, which movies to watch, and the overall excitement of the pajama party. Michael's offer to give Margaret and Eloise a free lesson of inspiration had them intrigued. Eloise, always eager for new experiences, didn't hesitate for a moment and was already geared up to go, practically bursting with enthusiasm. "Eloise, I'm in, Michael. Let's do this." However, Margaret, ever the cautious one, hesitated for a moment. She glanced at the clock and voiced her concern that it might be a little late to embark on such an adventure. Margaret, "Well, Michael, it's getting a bit late, and we do have the party." Before Margaret could finish her sentence, Michael interjected with a playful smile, "If it's not too late for the party, it won't be too late for this invitation either." His words were enough to convince Margaret, and she couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm and determination. With a nod, she agreed to accompany him, realizing that some spontaneous inspiration might just be the perfect. Eloise, eager to engage Michael and perhaps make him feel out of place due to Margaret's prestigious background, started sharing tidbits about Margaret and her family without being prompted. "Eloise, you know, Michael, Margaret comes from a really select family. Her great-great-grandfather was a patron of the arts, and their family mansion is practically a museum." Margaret raised an eyebrow, realizing what Eloise was trying to do, but Michael's response caught them both off guard. "Michael, wow, Margaret, your family must throw some incredible pajama parties in that mansion, huh?" Margaret and Eloise burst into laughter at Michael's unexpected and humorous response. It was clear that Michael was more interested in getting to know Margaret for who she was as a person rather than being swayed by her family's prestige. Michael's playful suggestion about adding graffiti to Margaret's family mansion, combined with Margaret's laughter, lightened the atmosphere even further. "Michael, well, if the mansion is old, shouldn't it be renewed with some graffiti?" Margaret couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of her family's reaction, especially her grandfather's. She imagined her grandfather, who had a deep appreciation for traditional art, being utterly shocked by the idea of their stately mansion covered in graffiti. Margaret, "Oh, Michael, you have no idea how much that would shock my grandfather. He appreciates art, but the traditional kind. Graffiti on our mansion would definitely be a surprise." The mental image of her grandfather's reaction added another layer of humor to their conversation, and they continued to share laughs as they walked together, united by their shared sense of fun and adventure. As Michael, Margaret, and Eloise continued their journey, they eventually arrived at an abandoned factory that seemed to be in the midst of transformation. The building had recently been purchased, and renovations were underway to turn it into a relaxation space. Upon reaching the facade of the factory, they saw that Michael had already started his creation. It was a mural featuring a group of children playing various games, their laughter and joy captured in vibrant colors. Margaret, "Wow, Michael, this is incredible. You've truly brought this wall to life." Eloise, "I didn't know you were so talented with graffiti, Michael." Michael, humbly accepting their praise, replied, "Graffiti is a way to connect with people and share stories. I thought this mural could bring some joy to this space, especially since it's going to be a relaxation area. Margaret and Eloise couldn't resist the allure of the buckets and brushes that had been left in a corner. The vibrant colors beckoned to them, and unconsciously, they began to paint alongside Michael, adding their own creative touches to the mural. Margaret, inspired, decided to create in the midst of this cheerful scene, a friendly clown with a bright smile who added an element of whimsy to the artwork, adding playful details and colorful patterns to make it stand out. Eloise, on the other hand, drew a whimsical space filled with animals, providing a backdrop for the children to interact with in their games. As they worked side by side, their individual contributions seamlessly blended with Michael's original artwork, resulting in a spectacular and harmonious mural that was a testament to their collective creativity. The abandoned factory was gradually being transformed into a vibrant and enchanting space, and the laughter of the children in the mural seemed to come to life on the walls. In a nearby room, a new party had started, and it was like stepping into a different world. The darkened space was filled with people who had covered themselves in fluorescent neon paint, creating an electrifying atmosphere. The music pulsed, and the crowd began dancing with unbridled energy. Michael, always one to embrace the moment, took Margaret's hand and led her into the heart of the dance floor. With neon paint in hand, he began to color her spectacularly, adding glowing patterns and designs to her outfit and skin. Margaret laughed and joined in the playful chaos, painting Michael in return. Meanwhile, Eloise found herself surrounded by two other boys who had been working on a painting. Together, they had nearly finished a captivating artwork that seemed to come alive under the black lights. The entire scene was a whirlwind of joy, laughter, and happiness, as if they had all entered a different dimension where self-expression knew no bounds. As they danced and painted under the neon lights, it was a night of pure, unadulterated fun and a celebration of art, friendship, and the magic of the unexpected. Eloise, intrigued by Michael's friend Jack, flashed a signal to Margaret, indicating her intention to spend time with him at the party. With a knowing look, she silently conveyed that she would call Margaret if needed. Margaret, understanding Eloise's gesture, gave her a nod and a supportive smile. It was clear that Eloise was eager to explore this new connection, and Margaret was happy for her friend. As Margaret danced happily amidst the neon-lit celebration, Michael approached her with a warm smile, and without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. Margaret was momentarily surprised but quickly responded by wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. Margaret, her heart racing, finally managed to find her words amidst the pulsating music and swirling neon lights. "Don't you have to stay away from society, artiste?" Michael chuckled softly, his eyes locked onto Margaret's. "You were always close in my thoughts, Margaret. How could I stay away?" Their intimate moment amidst the colorful chaos of the party felt like a perfect culmination of the connection they had been building. It was a declaration of their growing affection for each other, a testament to the power of art, and a promise of something beautiful blossoming between them. In the morning, Margaret found herself waking up next to Michael, their bodies adorned with colorful traces of neon paint from the night before. She blinked her eyes open, a momentary panic setting in. "Margaret, I'm late for class." Michael, who had already been awake and watching her with a fond smile, gently reassured her. Margaret, It's the weekend, and this is the morning, but not just any morning. It's the most special morning of my life." Margaret's confusion slowly faded as she processed Michael's words, realizing that there were no classes to rush to on this day. With a contented sigh, she settled back into the warmth of their shared moment, knowing that this weekend morning held the promise of a beautiful and memorable day ahead. While Michael was in another room, he happened to notice a spectacular drawing on the wall in an adjacent room. The artwork depicted a child receiving a toy from their father, and the toy was depicted as a war tank. The details and emotions in the drawing were incredibly vivid, capturing the complex relationship between innocence and conflict. In the lower right corner of the artwork, there was a distinct signature marked with the letter M. It was a signature he had come across before, one that was already familiar to him, the signature of the enigmatic graffiti artist known as Max. Margaret, intrigued by the discovery of Max's signature, couldn't help but wonder about the connection Michael might have with the mysterious graffiti artist. When Michael approached her, she decided to inquire, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Margaret, Michael, what connection do you have with Max? Have you met him before?" Michael, wearing a playful smile, decided to tease Margaret a bit. He replied, "Max? I don't know any Max. I'm Michael, don't you know my name anymore?" Margaret, expecting a more straightforward response, didn't appreciate the joke. She felt a bit hurt by Michael's reaction, interpreting it as a reluctance to share a secret with her. Without saying anything more, she left the room, feeling disturbed by the exchange and the unanswered questions about Max and the artwork. As Margaret returned home, she was met with an unexpected sight. Standing in front of the gate was Paul, the family driver. He wore a concerned expression as he approached her. "Paul, Miss Margaret, where have you been? You've completely forgotten about your father's birthday party. We've all been waiting for you for hours. Your friends didn't know where you were either." Margaret's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had completely forgotten about her father's birthday celebration, and her absence had caused confusion and concern among her family and friends. Guilt washed over her as she tried to find an explanation for her absence. Margaret, feeling a mixture of guilt and haste, searched for a trivial explanation for her absence as she began to prepare her luggage. She quickly wiped a spot of phosphorescent paint from her arm, a reminder of the vibrant night she had spent with Michael and Eloise. "Margaret, Paul, I'm so sorry for disappearing like that. You see, I was with my friends, and we got caught up in this impromptu art event. There was neon paint involved, and things got a bit messy. I completely lost track of time." Paul, though still concerned, nodded as he listened to her explanation and helped her clean the paint from her arm. "Paul, I understand, Miss Margaret, but your family and guests have been quite worried. Your father's been asking for you. Please, let's get you inside, and you can explain everything to him." As they prepared to go inside and face her family and the guests, Margaret couldn't help but feel apprehensive about how her father would react to her unexpected absence on his special day. As Margaret and Paul arrived home, they were greeted by the lively scene of a big party in full swing. Her father, caught up in the festivities and perhaps a few glasses in, hadn't yet realized that Margaret had been absent. Margaret's mother, Sophia, was in the company of her ex-fiancé and suitor, Eric. Eric had been waiting for Margaret, hoping to win her back, while her mother strongly supported this idea, preferring a married daughter to one pursuing an arts education. The family dynamics and the party atmosphere created a complex and potentially tense situation for Margaret, who now had to navigate her way through the celebration. Sophia, ever the matchmaker, couldn't help but seize the opportunity to encourage her daughter Margaret to reconsider her relationship with Eric. "Sophia, Margaret, my dear, how have you been mingling among strangers? Look at this fine young man from a respectable family, waiting just for you." Margaret, smiling politely and choosing her words carefully, replied, "Nowhere is better than at home, dear mother, you know that well." She leaned in and kissed her mother's cheek, conveying her affection and appreciation. Despite the pressure from her mother to pursue a more conventional path, Margaret remained steadfast in her desire to follow her passion for art and retain her independence. The tension between tradition and personal aspirations simmered beneath the surface, creating an intriguing backdrop to the family celebration. Margaret approached her father, holding out a carefully wrapped portrait she had painted as a gift. Her father, touched and grateful, accepted the gift with a warm smile. As he unwrapped the painting and saw the masterpiece before him, his eyes lit up with admiration. "Father, this is truly wonderful, my little artist. You always manage to comfort me with your talents. It's perfectly done." Overwhelmed with pride and affection for his daughter, he couldn't contain his enthusiasm and proudly announced to everyone present, "Look at the incredible work Margaret has created." The room filled with applause and congratulations as they admired the portrait, celebrating Margaret's artistic prowess and the special bond between father and daughter. Eric, with a hopeful and nostalgic look in his eyes, approached Margaret and began reminiscing about the times they had spent together. He recalled the great moments they had shared, believing that those memories could rekindle their relationship. However, for Margaret, those memories were distant and had never held the same appeal for her. Their relationship had only begun due to her mother's insistence, and true love had never been part of the equation. In the world of the affluent and privileged, such alliances were not uncommon, driven more by social expectations than genuine affection. Margaret couldn't ignore the fact that Eric seemed more interested in the idea of their partnership and the status it would bring than in their personal connection or her feelings. As Eric continued to talk about their future together, Margaret found herself torn between her family's expectations and her own desire for independence and authenticity in her life. Returning to school represented a moment of liberation and freedom for Margaret. It was a place where she could focus on her passion for art and where the important moments of her life would be written by her own choices and aspirations, rather than by societal expectations and family pressures. It was a place where her artistic journey could flourish, and where she could define her own destiny, free from the constraints of convention and social obligations. Michael, taken by surprise by Margaret's sudden departure and feeling a sense of urgency, tried to find her, but his search yielded no results as she had already left. Faced with the frustration of not being able to explain himself in person, he decided to take a more indirect approach. With a touch of mystery, he quietly sneaked into her room and left a notebook with a ticket under her pillow. Inside the notebook, he had penned a message, hoping it would convey his feelings and thoughts. The message read, "Maybe now you will understand, society artiste." Michael's gesture was an attempt to bridge the gap between them, to communicate the depth of his emotions, and to encourage Margaret to see beyond the surface and into his world. Eloise stumbled upon the booklet with the ticket that Michael had left under Margaret's pillow. However, when she saw it, she couldn't make sense of its meaning. Puzzled, or perhaps realizing that it held a deeper significance, she tossed the booklet and the ticket into the bin, leaving the mystery unexplored. The gesture added another layer of intrigue to the unfolding story, as the significance of Michael's message remained a mystery, known only to him. In the quietude of the house, Margaret's thoughts were consumed by Michael. She couldn't help but dwell on the unique moments they had shared and the undeniable charm he possessed. Yet, there was a growing sense of regret for the way they had parted. She hated him for not stopping her, for not explaining himself, and for his apparent unwillingness to share his secrets with her. As her emotions swirled within her, Margaret found herself torn. Part of her yearned for answers and transparency, while another part of her was beginning to accept that if Michael wanted to keep secrets, then that was his choice. She muttered to herself, "If he wants to keep secrets, let him keep them. It doesn't matter to me." It was a moment of inner conflict, as Margaret grappled with her desire for connection and her growing frustration with the enigmatic street artist who had captured her heart. Unable to find rest in the stillness of the night, Margaret was drawn to her desk, where she began to draw. It was a moment of solace and tranquility, a way to find herself amidst the turmoil that had consumed her thoughts. As she sketched and allowed her creativity to flow, a sense of calm descended upon her. In the embrace of her art, she eventually succumbed to sleep, her head resting on the desk, the strains of the day and her inner turmoil slowly giving way to peaceful slumber. However, as the night wore on, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, causing the window to swing open unexpectedly, disrupting her peaceful repose. Startled by the sudden rush of wind and the window slamming open, the drowsy Margaret hurried to close it. In her haste, she accidentally knocked over a basket, sending its contents scattering across the room in a chaotic mess. Groaning at the unexpected turn of events, she began to pick up the debris. As she collected the scattered items, Margaret noticed a piece of paper among the mess. It had a handwritten message on it, and part of it read "Society Artiste." Intrigued and puzzled, she searched for the missing piece, hoping to understand the context of the message. The note hinted at a connection to her secret admirer, Michael, and left her with more questions than answers. Margaret's eyes fell upon a notebook with a stained cover, and she couldn't recall that it belonged to her. Curiosity piqued, she carefully picked it up and began to flip through its pages. Margaret continued to leaf through the pages of the notebook, and as she did, she discovered sketches that were not only dated but also held significant personal meaning. Memories and emotions from various points in Michael's life were vividly captured in the images. On December 25, 2005, she found a sketch depicting a small child abandoned on the stairs of a house. Then, on June 1, 2009, she came across a drawing of the first colored pencils she had received as a gift. They were depicted as a towering pile of pencils that reached toward the sky, forming a makeshift ladder. At the bottom of the ladder, a child appeared to be shaking it, causing one pencil to fall. It was a representation of his early fascination with art. Another drawing, dated April 20, 2010, depicted a man giving a boy a toy in the form of a war tank. The man's face looked strikingly familiar, prompting Margaret to ponder, "I know him, but who is he?" The image stirred a sense of déjà vu, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she had encountered this man before, though she couldn't quite place him. Margaret's exploration of the notebook continued, and with each dated sketch, she unraveled more of its mysterious narrative. On July 12, 2012, she discovered a drawing of a little girl giving graffiti sprays to a boy. Strangely, the girl bore a striking resemblance to Margaret, and she couldn't help but notice that July 12 was her own birthday. The coincidence left her intrigued and somewhat puzzled. The following year, Margaret found another drawing featuring the same girl. This time, the girl held a drawing in the shape of a tree, seemingly offering it to a boy who appeared to be overjoyed and grateful. Margaret wondered if this tree was related to the graffiti drawing on the building she had seen earlier. Then, in a sketch dated October 10, 2015, Margaret came across an image of a girl who also bore a resemblance to her, drawing a portrait of a Greek god. This seemed to be a peak moment in the narrative, but the significance eluded her. The pages continued with the same girl, who had clearly grown over the years, drawing a picture of Princess Sisai and signing it with S.A. Margaret couldn't decipher the meaning behind these sketches and their connection to her own life. Margaret's mind was in turmoil as she processed the contents of the notebook. Anger and frustration simmered within her, and she couldn't help but voice her questions aloud, despite being alone in her room. "What am I supposed to understand?" she muttered angrily. Did Michael really mean it when he said I'm the girl from his dream who inspires him? Could there be such a connection between us? Her mind was racing with doubts and suspicions. As she continued to scrutinize the sketches, Margaret pondered the possibility that the tree drawn with the signature M was actually Michael's work. Could he be the famous artist behind those drawings, including the enigmatic Max she had heard about? Her preconceived notion that Max was over 40 years old seemed to be contradicted by the timeline in the notebook. Margaret's thoughts raced further, and she couldn't shake the feeling of bewilderment. "Why am I depicted in these sketches?" she wondered aloud. It was a perplexing mystery, and Margaret couldn't help but grapple with the enigma that was Michael and his intricate web of art and secrets. As Margaret continued to contemplate the mysteries surrounding Michael and their connection, she couldn't help but ponder the possibility that he might be her soulmate. The idea of soulmates implied a profound spiritual connection that transcended the ordinary bonds between individuals. Margaret mused to herself, could it be that Michael is my soulmate? Do we share that deep, spiritual connection that soulmates are said to have? She reflected on the feeling she had when she was around him, the sense of familiarity, the excitement, and the magnetic attraction that seemed to pull them together. These were all qualities often associated with soulmates. Her heart beat faster at the thought, and Margaret couldn't deny the possibility that Michael might indeed hold a special place in her life, one that defied explanation and drew them closer together with each passing hour. In her newfound realization about Michael and the deep connection they shared, Margaret's heart raced with excitement. She was determined not to waste another moment. Eager to find Michael, she dashed through the school corridors, her mind consumed by thoughts of him. In her haste, Margaret accidentally collided with Eyeglass, scattering his books and papers. She quickly apologized for the mishap, but when Eyeglass looked at her from a different angle, something seemed to click in his mind. "You are Michael's father, or perhaps Max," Margaret ventured, his voice tinged with curiosity and suspicion. He gestured for Margaret to slow down and guided her into an adjoining room, where they could speak more privately. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and Margaret was eager to understand the truth behind the enigma. As Eyeglass opened up to Margaret, he shared a poignant and heartfelt story about his relationship with Michael. He recounted how he had met Marie when she was pregnant, and circumstances had separated them when he received a mission in Afghanistan as a soldier. Tragically, Marie had passed away during childbirth, leaving Michael in the care of her mother. Eyeglass had missed the precious moments of Michael's birth and early years. Upon his return, he had discovered that Michael's mother had also passed away, and the child had been placed with an adoptive family who seemed to provide him with happiness and stability. Eyeglass, torn by conflicting emotions and the desire to be part of Michael's life, had chosen to give the child a toy in the shape of a tank as a symbolic gift to instill courage. He explained, "I didn't want to disrupt his life with his new family. I felt I had no right to do so." Then he didn't see him for a long time until he saw that drawing with the tank on the school walls. It was that moment when he recognized Michael's unique artistic talent and felt an even stronger connection to him. Yet, as time passed and he recognized Michael's talent and the striking resemblance to Marie, Eyeglass couldn't help but become involved in Michael's life, including posing activities that brought them closer. With a hint of longing and uncertainty in his voice, Eyeglass confessed, "I would like to be his father if he would let me, but it's all so complicated, much too complicated." Margaret expressed her gratitude for Eyeglass's openness and shared her thoughts, saying, "Michael would have been lucky to have a father like you. Time is not lost, and perhaps you will have the opportunity to get to know each other better in the future." Eyeglass, his emotions stirred by their conversation, nodded appreciatively and replied, "He is all I have left of Marie." The bond between them was evident, and the hope of a deeper connection between father and son lingered in the air. Margaret approached Michael, her heart filled with emotion, and found him fixated under the bridge, contemplating the drawing of Princess Sisai. She gently inquired, "Aren't you interested in seeing the real shape of the drawing?" Michael, lost in contemplation, replied with a sense of uncertainty, "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything seems unreal. Does that shape even exist or not?" Margaret continued the conversation, probing deeper, "But does Max exist? He also seems unreal. Michael, who do you prefer, Max or Michael?" With a playful smile, Margaret responded, "Well, Max sounds more mature." Michael approached slyly and said, "Well, in that case, you'll have to settle for an autograph," as he deftly drew the letter M on her shirt. Margaret, pretending to be annoyed, teased, "You're so vindictive. Can't you forgive me for the shirt?" "I'd like to forget, but I don't see any regret," Michael continued, his gaze locked onto Margaret. Margaret, with a hint of a mischievous smile, replied, "Well, how can I regret it when it was a perfect moment?" Michael's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he whispered, "You haven't seen the perfect moment yet." He gently approached her, drawing her into a deep and passionate kiss, sealing the connection between them with unwavering emotion.